watching Canadian Muslim news on Muslim Network TV from Toronto, Ontario. I'm Katherine Bullock. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace. Today's interview will be with Saleha Faruque from Justice for All Canada, a human rights organisation that has issued a report card on the federal party's stance about human rights. First, some news headlines. Canada's inflation rate is the highest since 2003. Canada's inflation rate was 4.1% in August. That's the highest it has been in the last 2 decades. Supply chain issues and economic openings as COVID restrictions are lifted contributed to the inflation rate increase. Issues surrounding the production of semiconductors increased the price of automobiles. This increase has been climbing as the highest rate since 1994. Douglas Porter, the chief economist of the Bank of Montreal, said that the peak rate may continue for months due to continued strain on energy, food, and home prices. Gasoline prices increased by 32.5% in August because of low production during the pandemic. The price for meat has also risen by 6.9%. This was partially due to the increased demand from restaurants. Porter added that employers will need to pay up front in order to hire more people. This will be accompanied by an increase in wages with the upcoming month. Qatar gives $40 million of aid to Gaza. Qatar has resumed aid to Gaza months after the violence between Israel and Hamas began in May. Government officials from Hamas say the money is being distributed in supermarkets, money exchange shops, and other retail stores. According to the UN, the funding totals to around $40 million. Qatar has been giving aid to the Gaza Strip since Israel's occupation in 2014. After being elected as Prime Minister in June, Naftali Bennett promised to halt Qatari diplomats from carrying suitcases of money across the border. Critics viewed this as an instance of Israel losing the upper hand to Hamas. Experts warn about Canada's declining economic growth. President of the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy, Kevin Page, who is also a former parliamentary budget officer, said that the Conservative and Liberal parties are not properly addressing economic growth. According to the Canadian press, growth rates in Canada have been in long-term decline since the 1970s. In its latest budget, Finance Canada forecast that Canada's GDP growth would average 1.8% in the next 5 years. Over the span of the campaign's 36 days, party leaders have outlined broad pandemic spending plans, but have fallen short in terms of mapping economic regrowth. Other economic experts agree that while it is necessary to plan the spending on healthcare, childcare, and similar programs, it is also important to strategize how Canada will grow its economy. SpaceX sends all civilian crew into orbit. A SpaceX rocket carrying 4 space tourists blasted off Wednesday night from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. This was for the first mission to orbit the globe with an all-civilian crew. A few have gone before and many are about to follow, said Jared Isaacman, the 38-year-old billionaire who chartered the flight. The spaceship's trajectory will take it to an altitude of 357 miles, which is deeper into space than the International Space Station. After spending 3 days spinning around the planet, the 4-person crew will splash down off the Florida coast. That's it for the news. And now our interview with Saleha Faruque, the Communications Manager at Justice for All Canada. In the federal election campaign, a lot of organisations are putting out report cards assessing the parties on the various issues that matter to them. One such organisation, Justice for All Canada, which is a Muslim-led human rights organisation in Canada, began its work in 2012, has issued what I believe is its first report card on 5 party platforms. The card assesses the Liberals, the Conservatives, the New Democratic Party, the Greens, and the Bloc Québécois on 4 of Justice for All campaigns, which are around human rights to do with the Uyghur, the Indian minority rights, Kashmiris, and Rohingya. So joining us today to explain and discuss the report card is Saleha Faruque, Justice for All Canada's Communications Manager. Thank you for joining us, Saleha. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, and it's quite an honor to be speaking with you today, Dr. Katherine. Thank you so much for having us.
It's our pleasure. Now, let's just start with a very, very quick overview of all the report cards. Tell us what each party overall rating was.
So the party ratings came in quite similarly in that we were looking at various human rights causes and campaigns that we cover as an organization as a whole. So beginning with the Liberal Party, when looking at quite a range of issues, I admit, Indian minority rights, as well as the Uyghur crisis, Kashmiris, and Rohingya refugees. We know that the Liberal Party has been known for making quite a number of strong statements, as well as leading a couple of United Nations humanitarian resolutions on various so-called efficiencies and various solutions to the issues that you see here. However, in terms of actioning on those commitments or promises, we do see less of like an effective steps towards actioning on a lot of the issues that you see on the report card. So as you can see here, the Liberals did receive around a C in general for genocide as well as crimes against humanity happening in various regions. Moving on to Conservatives, of course, Conservatives have been quite a champion in the Uyghur genocide, and they've led over 100 petitions, parliamentary petitions, in regards to sanctioning the Chinese government for the various crimes against humanity, the internment camps, the forced labor happening of Uyghur Muslims in the region in East Turkestan and Xinjiang. We do hope that in their resolve to sanction China, we hope that they can do the same for India. We know that the Conservatives have spoken very highly of Canada's business relationship with India, but we must also remember that India has been committing a lot of those same human rights abuses in the region as well, especially towards religious and ethnic minorities as well as indigenous minorities in India. The New Democratic Party has done very well, not just with their recent response to human rights demands made by Justice for All Canada and a lot of other similar human rights organizations, but they've been really talking about the rights of minorities throughout various initiatives that they've held earlier this year, such as their recent convention in February. So one big example is Kashmir. They have pledged to champion the rights of Kashmiris at the United Nations and help to reinforce their right to their land and their indigenous resources. The Bloc Québécois, of course, with them being a little bit of a smaller platform, but we have interestingly seen them come out in support of Kashmiris, and we hope that that support for indigenous peoples in the region and their condemnation of India's citizenship laws can also be translated to a lot of similar, I would say, discriminatory measures that are happening in Quebec right now, which is with Bill 21.
And the Greens?
Yes, well, the Green Party, of course, with their stance on environmentalism, they have come out very strong in terms of supporting different regions like Kashmiris. So we just need more of a commitment from them in terms of foreign policy with the Green Party of Canada.
Okay, so let's just do a summary. So the Liberals got a C, the Conservatives a C minus, the NDP a B plus, the Bloc a D, and the Green a C. So nobody's getting an A.
Unfortunately, nobody is getting an A because as we believe human rights commitments, things like statements, declarations here in Canada, we need to follow those up with actions. And so far, we haven't seen any actions being undertaken for minorities around the world that are suffering without status, that are living without basic rights, that are living under conditions of inequality. as well as various crimes against humanity. And we mentioned with Uyghur Muslims who are currently undergoing a genocide, as well as Indian Muslims that do suffer the consequences of state-sponsored discriminatory policies against religious minorities. So until we can see those steps taken, no A's to go around, unfortunately.
So if I read between the lines, does that mean that you feel that the parties are just sort of making words and not actions?
Well, the way that we see it, especially when speaking with our supporters, as Canadians, we do believe that global human rights should be an election issue, and that Canada is a party to several major international legal instruments. But unfortunately, we've often trailed behind allies such as the United States and Australia when it comes to effectively leading justice and accountability initiatives for perpetrators of crimes against humanity, as we've discussed just now. And there could be so many reasons why we need more than statement, and action is rarely implemented. But it's also quite important to let federal leaders know, and this is what we plan to do with our report cards, that the rights of minorities should be prioritized over things like business and trade benefits that we enjoy with major economic superpowers. And that's why I had mentioned China and India. So I would say our organizational mandate at Justice for All Canada, we do focus on things like majoritarian countries that do have certain ethnic and indigenous minorities, so for example, China, India, and Burma. And the report cards are basically, just to answer your question, a track record of every commitment, every kind of piece of support that we've ever seen, or on the other hand, non-actions by parties when it comes to persecuted minorities in these regions, including Kashmir. And I just wanted to add very quickly that we do actually run solidarity campaigns for injustices suffered by Palestinians as well as Afghans and domestically Indigenous peoples in Canada.
When I saw the report cards, and they were organized quite easy on the eye, so with the columns, it was easy to follow the issue. And I was wondering, how did you come with the global assessment? If we broke them down, for example, if we used each column was its own assignment, so to speak, and then there was a final year-end mark or something. Sometimes it looks like on one issue, one party might have done better than the other. So, for example, the Conservatives seem to be doing much better than the Liberals on the Uyghur issue. The Bloc seemed to be doing better on many of the issues that you had listed. But in the final analysis, you gave the Liberals a C and the Conservatives a C minus, and the Bloc got a D. So tell us a little bit about, I don't know if you had a formula, or how did you come up with putting together the 4 columns or the 5 columns into that final global assessment?
Of course. So the way that we looked at it is we started off with our major campaigns and the top human rights issues that Justice for All Canada focuses on as a nonprofit anti-genocide organizations. And then we looked at each party's platforms and their foreign policy commitments within the last 2 years. So of course, much can be said about the different human rights commitments and different human rights stances that party leaders, as well as MPs belonging to respective parties, that they might have taken in, let's say, the past 10, 15, 20 years. And we definitely acknowledge that. But just for the purpose of being able to kind of effectively summarize these stances and the level of commitment kind of in one page, we looked at what was done in the last 2 years, and we compared and contrast according to the certain demographic that we're looking at, and the lack of rights enjoyed by certain populations in these demographics, and what each party has in mind and has in store. And the purpose is just to, first of all, educate different members of parliament, lawmakers, as well as Canadian ministers on the fact that Canada is signatory to a number of international humanitarian laws, and also to educate Canadians that Canada must play a bigger role in foreign policy and why that should be in terms of meeting our obligations at the United Nations. So all of this kind of took precedence when we were doing the research, reaching out to the different parties. We've also sent questions that were relating to the federal report card that was published, and we are waiting for the responses from those party leaders.
So last question, just to wrap it up. what kind of response are you getting, like from the community that are your supporters, or maybe the critics, and also from the candidates?
Definitely a very important question. We have to keep in mind that parliamentary offices are currently limited in the amount of campaigning that they can do. So that being said, we are currently following up on our federal report cards directly through their constituency offices. This is something that is possible. However, just recently, our organization, along with other co-organizers on the hashtag Vote Kashmir campaign, so I'm talking about the organization Just Peace Advocates with Executive Director Karen Rodman. I know that she was a guest on your show. So together, for example, we've approached major parties with a lot of background information on the issue of Kashmir, for example, and the Indian government's revocation on Kashmir special status. And just in terms of getting reactions, we have gotten responses to the hashtag Vote Kashmir campaign. So, for example, I would say, unsurprisingly, we've received the NDP's full pledge to resolve the conflict in Kashmir and to establish a special parliamentary committee that would examine all aspects of the India-Pakistan relationship concerning Kashmir. These promises were, as I said earlier, were actually already made by the NDP in a convention that they had held earlier in the year. And on the other hand, to receive full support from the Bloc Québécois was also quite encouraging for the Vote Kashmir campaign. But last thing I want to say, in our opinion, hearing the Bloc's strong condemnation of India's citizenship laws immediately brings to mind Bill 21, which in our opinion also discriminates against religious identity. So there's a lack of consistency there that makes us question their logic in supporting Kashmir. And of course, just from community members, as well as volunteers, as well as our various supporters, it's been very positive in terms of our federal report cards that went out, and we hope that it'll be a guide to Canadians when they go out there and cast their vote.
Do you think you'll be doing this every year then? Every election, I mean?
Definitely, I think with a positive response that we've gotten, and especially with our one of our strategic goals, which is to amplify education and awareness, both in terms of lobbying efforts, as well as on the ground grassroots type advocacy and campaigning, we'll definitely continue publishing report cards and holding the government and various parties in power accountable for the promises or their non-promises that they make in terms of fulfilling the human rights of global minorities that are currently persecuted.
Well, we thank you very much and commend you for the effort and all the research that went into producing that and in your advocacy. So thank you very much for taking out the time to come and join us on the show today. Saleha Faruque, Communications Manager from Justice for All Canada.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. That's it from us, Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Stay tuned for the next episode. Stay safe and God bless.